I'm delighted once again to be joined by Sergej, who is one of the greatest activists for Ukrainian victory there is. I'll get him to say a few words about himself. Before we do that, you absolutely have to subscribe to his channel. Him and his team have extraordinary guests on. They do great in-depth interviews. Very similar in some ways to what we're trying to achieve on Silicon Curtain. We share ideas, we get ideas from each other. Definitely you should add his channel to your viewing list. It is absolutely essential. What Sergej does, which I don't do, is that he's also extremely, I would say, brave, and he's been all over the front lines in Ukraine, delivering drones, understanding what the requirements are at the front line of different battalions at different times in the conflict. He's a huge fundraiser in Germany, especially amongst those who don't necessarily agree with the policies of their government and would like to see Ukrainian victory. But I'll let him tell more about that because he's come back from Kursk, and I think this could be an incredibly insightful conversation for people from an eyewitness to these. Before we jump into that, thank you to everyone who is helping out with our convoy and project. We've now got some events, podcasting studios, all this stuff set up. We're continuing the fundraiser until we hit our target to cover all the costs of that trip. But these events are all now happening and the logistics are starting to come into place. So you will see the results of the fabulous support you've given the channel and my whole team. And for those who've been watching Jonathan M.S. Pierce, as you know, and others will be coming with us, and you'll see the results of that very, very soon. For now, though, Sergej, welcome back to the channel.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this fantastic introduction, dear Jonathan, and thank you for the for all your nice words and this introduction and invitation to your show. It's always a pleasure and an honor to be here, and your questions show that it's actually I actually miss any interviews with you because like you know much more than you say, and your questions demonstrate very clearly that you can answer any of your questions with a lot of eloquence and knowledge and understanding of the situation. That anyway, it's very good to very pleasant to be your guest, and I totally enjoyed. Thank you so much. And indeed, we do a lot of fundraising in Germany. Thank you for this endorsement. We have raised over 1 million euro within 2024. Mostly this money went into supply for Ukraine, drones, but also other types of equipment, starting from power stations, solar panels, medivacs, medical equipment, all possible things. And yes, indeed, I visit Ukraine every month. I've recently checked my passport, and I saw that starting from like 2022, I have no single month in which I was not in Ukraine. So it's every month, enter, exit stamps. And on Christmas 24, I indeed visited Kursk Oblast of Russia under control of the Ukrainian army. So we celebrated Christmas on the sovereign Russian territory. It was the second visit of the Kursk region. The first one was within a week after the beginning of Ukrainian incursion in August, and yeah, it was like pretty sad to see. Like when I was on my way, I recognized houses which I remembered being intact as I've been there in August, and now they were destroyed, hit by Russian bombs, and the soldiers also confirmed that there were a lot of hits during the last months, and so the fighting are not getting easier, they are getting harder. But we can talk about everything within this conversation. Thank you that you stay on Ukraine's side. Thank you that you empower Ukrainian voices. And thank you everyone who stays on Ukraine's side and donates for Ukraine and spreads Ukrainian message and don't falls into Russian propaganda trap like many of our politicians have done, including our inglorious Chancellor Scholz, who I hope soon will be forgotten.
And let's not mention the president as well, who has a curious attitude to Russia too.
Don't start with that. We can go through the whole political landscape in Germany, and believe me, it will be very hard to find an unspotted person.
Kursk is fascinating, though, isn't it? Because that's not an area that I'd ever visited during my travels, but I've been to Pskov and other areas that are not, not a million miles from there. That would be very, very similar sort of villages and sort of provincial landscape, long streets with little wooden houses and so on. Some better preserved than others. But it's the people I'm fascinated in because some interviews have come out with local residents. And of course, you have to have a little bit of let's say, sort of cynicism around some of those because they pick and choose the conversations. But they're extraordinary. There's a little old lady and a man saying that Ukrainian soldiers have been nothing but kind to them. They brought them medication, checked on them to see if they were warm, etc. And then you have other interviews where, people whose houses have been sort of wrecked, as you described, or their property violated and stolen. And they're asked, well, who did this? It was, of course, Russian army. So it seems the Russian army are violating and terrorizing their own people in the Kursk territory, but also reports they're using glide bombs and the kind of tactics they use to annihilate Ukrainian towns. It seems they have absolutely no compunction about doing this on their own people as well. Did you get any impression of any of this stuff?
Well, first of all, it's not a surprise that Russian army harasses any population, including their own ones. Uh, it's not a surprise. It's what the Russian army is doing since centuries. And we have seen that on Russian TV, the first weeks, Russian TV, state TV, tried not to talk about Ukraine's incursion in the region of Kursk. But then when it was clear that you cannot hide it, they started to address, and Putin promised first to liberate Kursk area until the 1st of October, then until the New Year Eve. And now, it is being postponed into infinity or into the future. But interestingly, the rhetorics on Russian media has changed dramatically, and the same calls to erase, to eradicate, to destroy Ukrainian cities, which Russian talk shows repeatedly spread through all the years of this full-scale war, they started to use the same rhetorics addressing a Kursk region. And that was practically announced on Russian state TV. That was what Russian experts and journalists and military personnel openly said. And I watched once like an interesting video clip recorded by the Ukrainian army when the Ukrainian soldiers just addressed the Russian citizens in Ukraine-occupied territories of Russia and asking them like, do you know like what they tell on Russian TV about what to be done with you? And then this Russian citizen said, oh yeah, maybe they want to help us, la la la. And then the Ukrainians said, no, just watch. And then they started like on their iPhone or on their other smartphone, they started to demonstrate them clips from Russian talk shows with these calls to bomb it to the ground, to carpet bomb Suja, to carpet bomb other towns, and saying that, yeah, we lost these people anyway, we don't care about them, they may die, who cares? And then you needed to see the faces of these citizens. Like, do you remember that clip, Are We Baddies Now? That was the same expression, like, oh my gosh, what they plan to do with us. Because before that, they have never questioned the truth on Russian state TV because they have never been on another side of being attacked. And now they suddenly realized it. It was like really interesting to watch. And then another aspect which we also need to understand that when we watched all these videos and when I went to Kursk region first in August, there were indeed a lot of people who spoke Ukrainian, at least broken Ukrainian, who could understand Ukrainian, and who said, "Yeah, we are practically Ukrainian. We're practically Ukrainian. We understand it." And it was also not a surprise because the stripe on Russian territory beyond Russian-Ukrainian border, these areas were ethnically populated by the Ukrainians. in the 19th century, early 20th century. And when the borders between the Ukrainian Socialist Republic and Russian Socialist Republic were drawn by the Bolsheviks never made borders according to the areas of certain ethnic groups. They always wanted to create uncertain areas, like giving a bit of Armenian territory to Azerbaijanis, Azerbaijani territory to Armenians, Bashkir territory to Orenburg region, Tatar territory to Bashkortostan, etc., to create these bombs to control people through their division. And the same happened here. So I remember as the Ukrainian ambassador, former Ukrainian ambassador to Austria, and now he works in Kiev, Alexander Sherba, who I highly recommend for your podcast. His grandmother was from Kursk Oblast, but she was Ukrainian. And he remembered that when he visited his grandmother close to Rilsk, it's a city which is now still under control of Russia, but also belongs to this Ukrainian belt in the Kursk Oblast. She brought him to the shore of a river and told him, look, until this river, we Ukrainians live, and beyond this river, the Muscovites live. So it was absolutely clear back then for them which village is Ukrainian, despite of the fact that it is located on the territory of Russian Socialist Republic and where the real Muscovite territory is stored. And ironically, this division suddenly gained importance 80, 90 years after this artificial border was drawn.
And did you get a chance to speak to people on the ground? Because, of course, my understanding is you're fluent in Ukrainian, fluent in Russian, or able to hold a conversation at least. Did you get to chat with any of the locals there? We'll get on to sort of soldiers and the impression you got from the Ukrainian troops there. But did you have any interesting conversations with locals?
Well, you can talk, of course, to the locals, and especially in the first weeks, I talked extensively with them. And for example, one lady asked me back then to record her on video and post it on YouTube, which I made because she wanted her family to know that she's alive. And she addressed her daughter who escaped this town, and she didn't know like if this daughter has made it safely or not, and the daughter didn't know if the mother is alive. So she said, please record me. That is my name. That is my surname. I want my daughter to recognize me and to know that I'm alive. And that was a very intensive, informationally intensive environment back then. And now it's quite different, because you don't have people on the streets anymore. And it is also very understandable because first, it's December, it's cold and dark. Second, the Russians bomb Suja regularly. Like when I visited Suja for the first time in August, you park like on the central square, and of course, like you don't walk around like waving a flag, like inviting a Russian drone, but still you're pretty much relaxed. You hear something on the background, but it was fine. And now it's quite different. It's quite different. You see a lot of destruction. You see a lot of gliding bombs having hit the buildings. You hear explosions every time. Like every minute, you hear a very close explosion, and a lot of Russian drones. A lot of Russian drones. Because Russians now, they saturate the sky, especially in Kursk Oblast, in Kursk region, with optic fiber drones. Because normal drones, they have their communication with the pilot via radio. And if you can, let me go into some technical details here, because drones is what we do, right? So there is a limited number of frequencies which drones use for communication with the pilot. And one communication channel is being used for operating the drone, to give the drone signal, throttle, watt rotor, back, forth, left, right, just flying the drone. And another signal comes from the drone itself, sending a video signal from the camera. That is why the drone is being called FPV, first person view drone, because the pilot sees exactly what the drone sees. So this is like double communication channel, okay? And if you jam one of these channels, the drone cannot fly because either the pilot cannot see what the drone sees or the drone doesn't know where to fly. And normally the drones are being programmed so it flies just like the last direction which it was flying, like it continues to fly, but it cannot be guided anymore. Okay. So normally when you are on your way in a car or on feet, you have a frequencies analyzer with you, which the Ukrainians call Sakharok or Cukarok, which is, I don't know where the name comes from, but it literally means a little piece of sugar. And when it sees, like when it's practically a radio receiver, when this radio receiver gets one of frequencies which drones are using, that means that somewhere close to you, an enemy drone is flying and this drone emits a signal. And this signal gets received by your warning device. And this warning device tells you somewhere close to you, there is a device emitting this drone frequency. And you need to be aware that it is most probably the drone. In this moment, you need to switch on, if you have not yet, your jamming device. And jamming device is practically an emitter of the signal on the same frequency, which is so powerful that it blocks the signal of the drone. So the drone signal is practically covered on this frequency by your jamming emitter. That's how you breach contact with the drone. Of course, there are limited numbers of frequencies, but there are many, so you cannot jam all the frequencies, and your jamming device cannot work all the time because it gets overheated, etc. But still, you have a chance to jam the drone, okay? And now imagine that the contact between this drone and the pilot is not being maintained by the radio frequency, but by a wire. And that's what the Russians, and Ukrainians also, but Russians very extensively, are doing now. So a drone flies and lets a long optic fiber behind it, 5 kilometers maximum length, 8 kilometers. We're talking now about up to 10 kilometers. It's
That's
practically
incredible. That's incredible. So you've got these little trails, and once the drone's done its business, those just get abandoned and dropped in the.
Some woods in the area are literally covered with these optic fiber nylon trails, like the way to Moria through the Shelop cave. It's like hanging around. Because the Russians use hundreds and hundreds and thousands of such drones, and each drone independently, does it hit the target, does it not, it leaves this trail. But the problem is for you as a potential target that you cannot jam this drone. You can only try to shoot it down, which is much more complicated. You need special equipment for that, and you cannot be sure, and most Ukrainian units don't have such equipment. So if you get targeted by an optic fiber drone, you will most probably be hit. And that makes the whole situation very nasty because you cannot jam it. Like I personally, I've been to some situations when there is a radio guided drone over you. And that with a jamming station, if your jamming station works properly, if the frequency is okay, then you have good chances. But if there is a drone over your head and it's optic fiber, you are in a very, very bad situation. And that's why also the civilians don't dare to exit their houses. They don't have anything to seek for. The first week, they were like taking food from the stores. Now there is no food in stores. They know anything they want to know, they need to know. There is no change in the situation, so they just sit in the basements. And those who have not evacuated, because many have left the area and have left the town, of course.
And we did an episode on it, and of course, Ukraine has um, pushed further into Kursk. So territory was lost, and as you say, the devastation that you're seeing is because territory has changed hands, maybe more than once. Then there's this surge in Kursk in the last couple of weeks. It seems that the territorial gains are fairly incremental. Nonetheless, they broke through Russian positions. They used some interesting electronic warfare techniques to sort of jam the Russian positions to break through the lines. But without giving anything, sensitive away, what's your impression of the fragility of the military situation? Will Russia, or does Russia have the resources and, dare I say it, the capability to dislodge the Ukrainians, or are there, genuine issues on both sides?
Well, we need to remember that Ukraine does not fight against Russia alone. Ukraine fights against a joint front of Russia, Iran, North Korea, and probably China. And that is also what we need to keep in mind, that having North Korea as your ally brings you more allied support than when you have the United States or Germany as your ally. North Korea sends very real troops to the ground and doesn't care if these soldiers die on the front. So, especially in Kursk region, Russia massively uses North Korean troops. And those soldiers on the Ukrainian side I talked to called these North Korean troops a game changer for Russia. Not because there are like dozens of thousands of them, there are not, but it is enough to have several thousands of troops additionally in one narrow part of the front and be able to throw them into the battle to achieve an advantage and to have upper hand. And that is what Russia did in Kursk, trying to regain territory. Russians still have not managed to regain control of the whole Kursk Oblast, but Russian troops are pushing the Ukrainians in Kursk, using this advantage of freely provided 4 up to 5 digit numbers of North Korean troops.
And of course, I've been saying right from the start, why would North Korea just send 10,000? That might be the initial wave, but why would they only do that? Why would they not queue up a lot more troops so they could then rotate their troops and have that freedom, which neither the Ukrainians nor the Russians seem to have as much freedom to rotate troops, let them have a sort of breather from the front. I know that's been an issue. There are some people who've been at the front for 3 solid years now, and then prior to that, fighting on rotation in Donbass against the 10-year long war. Why wouldn't Korea queue up 20,000, 50,000, 100,000? A few months after we started talking about this on the channel and that potential, I just start to see some analysts and media pick up on that and say, okay, well, it looks like, there are more preparations being done. It would do a disservice, wouldn't it, to Ukraine to pretend this isn't a challenge. This is a major challenge, and Ukraine surely needs increased assistance from allies in order to cope with this.
Well, I would say it is pretty obvious why North Korea sends troops, because North Korea gets something in exchange. Missile technologies, nuclear technologies, some raw materials which North Korea needs. And if you have an oversupply of troops, and North Korea obviously has oversupply of troops, you can exchange them. It's practically a classic theory of mercantilism. Like when you have like some type of resources which you overproduce, but another country is lack of this resource, but has another type of resource which you don't have enough. You just exchange, and anyone comes out being better served. It's obvious. The problem is that this is not a business deal. This is a deal which impacts world security, world safety order, and the world just allows this to happen. So for the North Korean, for this new axis of evil, it is obvious that they want to challenge the world democratic alliance of nations and demonstrate to every single dictator in the world that the age of humans is over. The age of orcs has come, like we know from the Lord of the Rings. They want to demonstrate to all their brothers in dictatorship, we can challenge the most powerful nations, and they are cowards. They will do nothing against us, and we will dominate. We will cut them from one resource to another. We will kill one member of in their rows after another, and we will dominate. We will unite. We will exchange technologies. We will exchange technologies of internal suppression, of external aggression. We will grow in our meaning, in our resources, in our economies, in our military technologies, and so on. So think there are now only two nations in the world which have experience in using FPV drones. And FPV drones is the same what in 1910s, 1920s, automatic rifles were, automatic handguns. And back then, in 1920s, a lot of generals in the armies were against the introduction of assault rifles. They wanted to keep the normal rifles because they said, first, you cannot make great parades with assault rifles. They don't look good. Secondly, the soldiers don't count ammunition anymore. They start wasting ammunition. You need 20 times more bullets to kill an enemy. It's terrible. It leads to lack of morality. It leads to a very bad situation. And look who won after all? Those nations who had enough automatic rifles. And the same is happening now. Like the generals and admirals don't want to have many drones. They stick to old traditional types of armament, like tanks, IFVs, maybe large winged drones. You may make a nice photograph with, operated from a container in Texas, fly on another side of the world, cost several million US dollars. Useless, absolutely. The Ukrainians tried to use Bayraktars TB2 in the first months. They've realized you cannot use them on the battlefield saturated with air defense. You can use like Reaper perfectly against Taliban. You can use Bayraktar TB2 against poorly trained Armenian army. But you cannot use them even against the Russian army, whose air defense is not up to date. So now you need to saturate your lowest level of the army, like platoons and squads, maybe battalions, with FPV drones, increasing the firepower of any single unit. And that is what generals in Bundeswehr or in the US Army don't understand yet. And they don't understand that any Ukrainian battalion, in theory, fighting a Bundeswehr battalion in an equal situation, like without massive air support, will wipe it out. Any Ukrainian battalion fighting a US Marine battalion, when the US Marine battalion doesn't have air support, will wipe the US Marines out within several hours. Even a Russian battalion will do it. Because we had a Maxim gun and they don't have it.
And
That
this is what
is
we're
the
seeing in
key.
North Korean troops, isn't it? We're seeing North Korean troops being sent across
Exactly.
fields without electronic warfare, and they don't even get near a Ukrainian soldier before they're all gone.
Exactly. Exactly. And that is what I think, that is what Kim is trying to achieve. He wants to send his troops to the most progressive and most intense war of this century. And he wants these troops to know how a future war looks like. Because, uh, even if like the Western nations would be invaded, who says that they will use nukes as a response? Or when South Korea gets invaded, who says you will nuke Pyongyang, having in mind that maybe Seoul will be nuked too? You will try to keep the war on the conventional level as long as possible, hoping that you can fight the enemy using your technology advance, high precision munition, air force, and. But what if enemy is so progressive that you have not expected it? What if the enemy clears out your trenches using FPV drones carrying thermobaric ammunition, carrying flamethrowers, carrying high explosive charges, just one by one trench, and then your defensive lines doesn't cost anymore. We have a case when a Ukrainian drone hits a Russian air defense radar, Tor M2, which costs 25 million euro. The drone itself costs 400 euro, and you cannot protect your radar. So what happens to all your investments and all your inflated military budgets when the enemy has a swarm of AI-operated drones which communicate between each other, which can identify targets and fly onto it? You will not install a Vulcan Gatling gun system to each of your battalion headquarters. You don't have enough of them. So you will be just overwhelmed by these drones. I don't speak about the ability of the terrorist groups to organize terrorist attacks of any kind in your cities. Just give a terrorist 100 drones, which is a budget of, let me say, 50,000 euro, and some high explosive charges, and give them like two, three, four Russian soldiers from the Wagner group who have knowledge of operating these drones. And there will be 7th October every day in every single country of the world. And that is what we are facing. The Western reluctancy allowed the axis of evil to regroup, to train, to find our vulnerabilities, to train their soldiers, to develop and appropriate new ways of warfare. And the only democratic country which can be a counterweight to this madness is Ukraine, and is let alone under the reign by the West. And when Ukraine fails, if Ukraine fails, this Ukrainian army will also be consumed, like it happened already by the Soviet Union, as the Soviet Union occupied Ukraine in 1920s. And all this knowledge will be used only in one way, and there will be no single democratic country in the world which knows how to fly a drone.
That's a terrifying vision of the future, obviously. And we also see other challenges, don't we? Because even if we um, become more aware of the risk of the challenge, our military-industrial complexes are just not used to these innovation cycles that are required to deliver this kind of innovation at scale and speed that Ukraine is achieving at the moment through a synthesis of civic society, uh,
Well, it
Silicon
is.
Valley style
It depends. It
entrepreneurship and
depends on. It depends on to whom you talk. Because look, for example, take me as an example. I worked for like 3 years as an NGO trying to help Ukraine with like all type of equipment development, etc. And then I said, okay, with my friends who also were in the same area, we said this war will take time, and as I said to you before, it will spill independently of how it ends, it will spill to our territories because enough of bad guys have this knowledge now. So what do we need to do? We have founded a company in Ukraine, a producer of drones. And this company, now with German capital, United Unmanned Systems, is producing drones for Ukraine. And this is a German company which came to Ukraine to help Ukrainians to fill this gap, which Ukraine still has, despite the number of very fantastic, amazing producers in Ukraine. Still, Ukraine doesn't have enough drones. And we produce these drones for Ukraine, in Ukraine, with German technology, with German engineering, and with a solid understanding of average Germans that this war will come to us. Scholz will go somewhere. He will find his way, like in administration, in Berlinska Oblast, etc. That we will not be able to live under this occupation. We'll all be eliminated, like Ukrainian good people get eliminated in the occupied region. So we came to Ukraine to produce drones there, to send them to Ukrainian army. And now we talk to other nations and say, look, we're a German company which does it, which has this knowledge. Why don't we start education of our armies with how to fly drones, how to introduce drones into daily fighting routine of a battalion? Because like in the minds of many German like generals or politicians, it is like, okay, drones are the future. So let's buy drones. Let's buy drones and let us put them on like on a shelf. No, it doesn't work like that. You need fly exactly as to be a good infanterist who knows his gear. You need to use this gear. You need to shoot. You need to throw grenades. You need to train your cooperation with tanks, with IFVs, with artillery, with aviation. Exactly the same is with the drones. You need fly drones. Drones are not an equipment like a tank or an IFV. Drone is a weapon. You need to use this weapon. You need fly them and crash them into a target. Only in this case you will be able to fly it good. We know that there are units in Ukrainian army when a drone unit shoots, let me say, 2 drones a day, 5 drones a day. That's not enough. That's not enough. You may it is like playing guitar. If you say every day I take 3 accords and I do it for the whole year, you will not be a better guitarist after a year. You need to play several hours a day to be a really good guitarist. And that is with the drones. You cannot say, I fly 1 drone every day. In 1 year, I will be a pro. No, you will never be a pro. You need to fly like 20, 30 drones a day, every day, cooperating with your unit. And then in 2 months, you're a good pilot. But when you stop for half a year, you will lose all your experience. And that is what our armies need to understand. We need to do it. We need to have reliable suppliers. We need to have reliable technologies. We need to invite Ukrainian soldiers who have the experience to train the Western armies. And that is what our company is doing, because we say, okay, we want to fight in the future war, which is inevitable. It's not up to us if it comes or not. Enough of bad guys have taste of the blood and like it now after these 3 years. They will attack us on that area or another area. And when this day comes, we need to fight together with Ukrainians against the bad guys. And we need to be not worse than the Ukrainians in this fight. And the Ukrainians can help us to come to that level. Because we can say, okay, we don't care, but we will be attacked anyway. And we need to be prepared.
I mean, you and I both live in affluent places, and you walk around towns, and there's no inkling, there's no impression whatsoever of the kind of threats that you're talking about, the kind of threats that, we discuss on my channel continuously. And the sort of global terror, chaos, in fact, that Russia is planning, because, we subscribe to the same vision of what's happening. But we've also not only not given Ukraine what it needs at the scale it needs, there have been protracted periods, such as last year, where very few supplies were coming through at all. And that caused considerable loss to Ukraine. So we talk about Ukraine being the only ones who are really fit and ready for what is happening and what is about to happen. But at the same time, they are tired, exhausted, and they're actively resisting, dropping the mobilization rate down to younger people, because there's a demographic crisis at those younger ages of 18 to 25. Ukraine cannot hold this line. It cannot do the West's job of defense for much longer unless we weigh in. What's your view on that? But what's the likelihood of this happening?
Well, many people in the West just don't understand what is the demographic situation in Ukraine and why the Ukrainians are not ready to sacrifice their youth in this war. Because you have like 3 times more men of my age, like 40 plus, than men of the age like 18 up to 25. And most men of like my age, they have children. Men of the age like 18 plus, they mostly don't have children. So if you cut this generation, first, like each loss is 3 times more painful for the whole group compared to the group of men of like 38, 48. And it has a huge demographic impact for the country for the next decades and decades. And until now, you see in Ukraine these waves with less numerous generations each 20, 25 years after the World War II, after the Holodomor. And you can see that the society never recovers. And here it will mean practically the absence of the whole generation. And this is one of the most immoral and cynical, and I would say effectively pro-Russian positions within the Biden administration, when people from Biden's administration came out and say, yeah, Ukraine actually need to think about lowering conscription age. Say, okay, do Ukrainians have enough arms to arm these units? No. So should Ukraine just arm them with like brooms and sticks and send them to die to the front, so you little slicky bastard sitting somewhere in safe, patriot and nukes protected capital of the most powerful country could say, okay, we stay on Ukraine's side. It's terrible what Russia is doing with its war of aggression. We condemn it and we stay on Ukraine's side. And we think maybe next year we'll deliver another Patriot battery to Ukraine. That is absolutely, absolutely immoral. And that is the worst bomb on the international order and solidarity of the countries. Because you can see that democratic countries, as the governments, I don't speak about the people because I know how people stay on side of Ukraine, how many volunteers come to Ukraine, how many money from private donations come to Ukraine. But the government demonstrate that there is no such bullshit, as solidarity, as world order, as international law, as security order, etc. It's only ideas, will it harm me during the elections? And can I get enough Russian gas and oil or share on Russian market for my companies? That is actually even worse than the dictatorships do, because the dictatorships, they at least stay for what they declare, right? When they say they support Russia in what Russia is doing, they really put their money where their mouth is. And that is so erosive. I think we will face, for the next decades, we will face such an erosion of the idea of international law, the idea that a defensive treaty, that an international agreement, that a commitment for some values is worth anything. We will face surge of number of nuclear powers. We will see nuclear proliferation. We will see arms race. We will see that all money which would have been invested into things like cure of cancer or climate change or poverty or infrastructure or anything, they will be invested into arms and for right, because I don't care about poverty more than about being tortured, kidnapped, killed, raped, and my family with me. So who cares about these things like international cooperation when it is about, will my nation be eradicated and me personally put into a torture cell or not? So we will have surge of uncertainty in the world. We will have like Game of Thrones without end, just because people have seen how much do promises cost in this world. They cost nothing.
And we're going to do a lot of episodes on this. We really started tackling these kind of issues with people. I think you have the sort of clarity of thinking you do. Coming back to your experience in Kursk and your interactions with Ukrainian soldiers, what is the kind of mood? What are the kind of conversations you have with people? What are the beliefs that motivate them? And how much mental pressure are they under? Because it must be deeply traumatic, not just fighting week in, week out, but year on end, and in the kind of winter trench conditions that many are having to put up with. This is humbling, but it's unimaginable for me actually how humans who come from civilian life, who never wanted to live this kind of life, who don't wish harm on anybody else, and that's the majority of Ukrainians, but they're having to do this, whether they're pacifists or not, they're having to do this to defend essentially not just their own lives, but those of their family, their children, their grandchildren, etc.
While it's physically hard, first it's cold. It's cold everywhere, and when it's not cold, you don't have fresh air, because like normally people live in very small and then sleep in very small cabins, and you have like all the challenges, and it's much better than sleep in a trench, of course, but still you have cold, you have lack of simple hygiene, like toilet, shower doesn't exist. In this winter especially, it's very dirty, like the temperatures are around freezing points, no roads, just mud. We were driving like huge wheeled truck, and so this truck could not manage the road. So we had a couple of times situation when we nearly, when we were driving, we nearly made an overall because of the road conditions. And of course, it's dark in winter, and a lot of drones pressure, and all the challenges an army faces, any army in the world, like car accidents, lack of well-trained recruits, because not everyone who comes to army, let's name things by name, not everyone who comes to army does it because they're volunteers now. Some come because they were conscripted and they don't want to stay in the army, and you need to convince them, and you need to train them anyway, and need to rely on them, and it's hard. It's absolutely hard, for sure. And also, one thing is an army which is advancing, and that boosts morale massively. At least, even if the next front is advancing, I remember when the Kursk incursion just started. I visited both Kursk and I visited Pokrovsk. In Pokrovsk, soldiers were they were facing very hard situation with Russian advancing, but they were happy because they knew that in Kursk their brothers are advancing in Russian territory. Now there is no front where Ukrainian army is advancing, and it depresses people. Of course, they know for what they fight, but they are still depressed. And there are other things, like there are less and less people in the country. There is uncertainty with U.S. presidential elections outcome. What will be Trump's new policy? Will Ukraine be thrown under bus, or will Ukraine be supported? Because let let us say very clear, the Biden administration didn't help Ukraine well. A lot of promises were done but never fulfilled. There are a lot of concerns about true motives of Biden administration. And many Ukrainians say, okay, we don't care. We want Trump. It will not be worse than Biden. Some say, okay, it will be. It always can be worse than Biden. It always can be worse than anything. Just wait. But some hope for Trump. Some don't trust Trump. Some are afraid of Trump. Everyone has their arguments, of course. But after all, it creates a level of uncertainty. And that is what my good friend told me, Sergej. You just need to adapt for living in the world of total uncertainty. That is our world for the next years. There is no such thing as a settled deal. There is no such thing as a clear path. You just need to make certain steps and you come to your goal. No, it doesn't work like that anymore. We live in a world with a constant fog of war, even amid peace.
And let's turn on the final topic because there's so much to pick up on for our next conversation. But let's turn to German politics because we're talking about doing another event in Berlin. I think it's a very significant time to do that this year. You've got elections coming up. You can maybe tell the audience when the precise date is. I can't recall when the date is, but you've got this seismic change. You've got Scholz, who is, I'm guessing, on the way out. He's been grasping at straws, trying to use Ukraine as a football, defer these agreed funds to Ukraine. One assumes for political points. He met with Putin. Again, one assumes to gain political points because there's no tangible change that he could have wrought by doing that. That strikes me as deeply immoral, but it'd be interesting to hear your point of view. But also, you've got the rise of the I could call them far right, the extreme far right nationalist, and comparisons have been made between a certain sort of failed Austrian painter and his style of delivering speeches, and the lady who's in charge of this upcoming party. But there's a very substantial, frightening proportion of the voters who do not seem to see that historical parallel or to care about it. I mean, what's your view on Germany, what's happening, and what we should be worried about?
Well, regarding the style of holding speeches, I would say that almost each German politician, if enjoyed the speech in a national language, sounds a bit like Hitler, not because they all parody Hitler, but because just like it sounded for the foreigners. And also, let us say, if you start speaking very emotionally in German with gesticulation, with a lot
Because
of
it's the arm movements.
hands movement, yeah.
Yeah.
And it sounds a bit like yes, but I don't think. Look, I'm the last person who would say AfD is a party like others, or like AfD is okay, or something like that. No, it's a far-right populist party, totally pro-Russian, with many people cooperating with Russia on the way that they want to whitewash Russian aggression, starting from the Crimea and from Donbass. And we know there is a significant amount of Chinese spies amid the AfD, workers in the parliament. And there are very clear calls from the members of the AfD. And we have read them all in internal charts when these internal charts were leaked, calling for real bad things, like really bad things, and using words and like vocabulary, which is, I would say, a dangerous and lethally dangerous. But I would not say that AfD is a phenomenon which grew up by itself. And B, I would not compare Alice Weidel or whatever with Adolf Hitler. Because, like, we want to compare the those who we know are bad with those who are internationally recognized as bad. And in Germany, a far right is naturally being compared with Adolf Hitler, of course. But actually, the only person in Europe which can be compared with Adolf Hitler by his deeds is Vladimir Putin, who loves AfD, but also loves Block Zara Wagenknecht also, because you can see what he's doing. Militarization of economy, chauvinism as national politics, wars of aggression, genocide, and. It's like claims to regain Russian sacred land, which were separated from Russia by unfair international treaties, etc., etc. That is clear the way which Adolf Hitler and his Nazis went. From the side of the AfD, I don't see such intentions. They have a very clear chauvinistic, racist, and xenophobic internal rhetorics, but that's all. That's bad enough. I need to stress that's bad enough. But that's all. And we could see also the same rhetorics from many German parties in different times. I mean, during the democratic time of Western Germany. CDU used the same vocabulary all the time in 60s, 70s. The lefts use partly the same vocabulary, trying to increase tensions between the Germans and the migrants, like Zara Wagenknecht, the leader of the leftist BSV party, accused refugees in like as a reason of high rental prices, etc., etc. Even from the Social Democrat Party, you always can hear this voice about like how much Ukrainian refugees are demolishing German social state. So it's not something typically AfD. AfD makes it very loud, but it doesn't make them to the specific party. What they are really specific in, they are trying to avoid any responsibility in the government, and at the same time they find the problems of the society and they address them, and they say, you're not happy with what is happening, vote for us. We will not be in the government. No. We are happy to be in the opposition and gain more and more and more votes, and we will address the real failures of this government, and this government has a lot of failures, and we will tell you, don't you like it, vote for us. And now look at the origin of AfD. The AfD was founded in 2013 as a party, 13, as a party which tried to address the issues of monetary policy within the European Union. This issue of do we need to pay for Greek debt? Do we need to bail out Greek banks? It was founded by a pretty conservative German economy professors like, I don't even remember his name, Lutke, I'm pretty sure I'm wrong. Bernd Lucke was his name. And they were against the policy of Angela Merkel of bailing out Greek banks. And then there come like another issue of the migrants who came from Syria. It was like this migrants wave, which was ignited by Russia's bombing of Syria. And Russia has tunneled all these migrants from Syria to the EU just to spark this chauvinism in the European Union. And then the far-right wing within this IFD has taken over. And only after that, they went into the parliament. They managed to pass through the 5% barrier. And that was the start of that. And they realized, okay, we just need to address the problems which many people think are problems. Because Germany, people like stability. People like the idea they go into the technical school or high school or university, they get their job, their first job, it will be their last job. They will never leave their city, they will never leave their job. They know exactly how many percent points each 3 years their salary will be increased, what will be their pension, and where they will be buried. That is the ideal German way of having good life. You don't have anything surprising. And the worst fears are inflation, poverty, migration, environment, because it's also change of your lifestyle, etc. So, and then it was no more. It was no more. And the AfD started to address all the fears. They said, okay, you don't know are your streets are safe or not anymore. And police doesn't make its job. And that is, I think, is crucial. The German contract, the social contract was all the time that we pay incredibly high taxes and we delegate incredibly high number of our rights to the state. And the state may decide, maybe buy something in store on Sunday. No, we may not. So it's okay. It's good for protection of the quality of life. May I take my child from a school one day before official vacation and fly with this child to vacation because the airline tickets are 3 times cheaper on that day? No, it's a criminal offense. It's a felony. It's not a misdemeanor. It's a felony. Police raids airports all the time, one day before the vacation starts, and hunts families with children ask, show me your papers. You live in Berlin. There are no ferry in Berlin, no vacation in Berlin. Why are you flying away? It's a criminal offense, etc., etc. And people said, it's okay, because we know that this way of life gives us a lot of stability and safety. And now the control is here, but the stability is away. And we know that the German police still works perfectly in hunting people who are good law-abiding citizens. Like if you or me, if we speed and drive like 20 kilometers faster, the police will find us. They will send a police officer to your door if you don't pay your ticket within a month. But if you get death threats, life threats, if you get beaten in the street, if you suffer from an arsonist attack, you may be sure that the police will say, oh, we actually don't know what to do with that. And the traditional parties can tell as much as they want that it has nothing to do with migration, but many people think it has. And of course they are wrong, or even if they're not, you cannot just heal the problem by cut migration and by deporting people, etc. But the level of mistrust into the state is very high. And then the populists come and they say, vote for us, we'll repair everything. You will live as you wanted to live 40 years ago. The life will be beautiful, only good weather, everything great, no unemployment, good salaries, safe streets, and you will be younger by 20 years. Just vote for us. And people don't think what kind of trap it is. They don't think about Russia connection of this party. They don't think about how this party wants to break law, maybe constitutional law, etc., etc. They just don't trust those who are in charge because they see all the rotating. And once again, and I think it's very important to understand the rise of AfD. Think about 16 years of Angela Merkel. 4 governmental terms. Only one term, the second one, was with the natural ally of the Christian Democrat Union, the Liberals. 3 terms out of 4 are the terms of the so-called Grand Coalition. The Grand Coalition is when the one big party, conservative or social democrats, cannot create a coalition with their traditional smaller party, and they unite. Before Merkel, it happened only once in German history. And it was an emergency solution after a governmental crisis for a very short time. Under Merkel, it was a standard. So you as a voter, you come to the poll station and you say, I don't want Merkel, I vote for Social Democrats. And you get Merkel. Next time you say, I don't want Merkel, I vote for the Greens. And you got Merkel. Next time I say, I want Liberals. You get Merkel. So many people have got an impression that democracy doesn't work anymore because nobody cares how you vote, how you see your future, you get the same Merkel. And then if democracy doesn't work anymore, okay, who are the baddies? Who are the enfants terribles? Who you hate most? The AfD? Okay, said many people, we vote for the AfD. And that is how AfD got more and more and more and more votes, because they said, those in the politics, they don't care about you, they trick you, they are not a part of your dreams, of your expectation, vote for us. Of course it was a lie, but it was a damned good working lie.
And there's some grain of truth because some politicians aren't working. Some politicians, of course, are not necessarily in it for the public good, but for, whatever it is, their own ego, the games that get played in politics, etc. And then the good ones, the hardworking ones, those who have vision, they all get tarred with the same brush. Well, the very last sort of brief question here is, with the change of government coming up, is it likely we're going to see a government that is a little more proactive with Ukraine? I mean, it has to be said that Germany has supplied a huge amount and constantly gets bashed for not doing enough. But Scholz has dragged his feet on a number of different weapons systems and has blocked the recent aid and, of course, has not provided tourists, which we now see tourists would have been very impactful given what we see now of Storm Shadow and ATACMS.
Well, I would say the next chancellor, and we can be almost sure the next chancellor will be Friedrich Merz, who is the leader of the Christian Democratic Union, the Conservative Party, that he will be the next chancellor. And I don't see how he will not, except something huge and terrible happens, which we could not predict. And it is not the question if Merz would be a chancellor or not, he will be. The real question is, what will be the party the Christian Democratic Union signs a coalition agreement with? What will be a coalition partner? And currently we have 2 options for Merz. The first option are the Social Democrats, without Scholz, but the whole elite of Social Democrats is not better than Scholz, and some are even worse. I know it's hard to believe that someone can be worse than Scholz, but believe me, Social Democrats are capable for such achievement. And another option is to be a coalition with the Greens. So both coalitions can be signed mathematically and politically, because they don't quite hate each other. Now the problem is, what party will Merz choose? And I think that 60-70% of chance he will choose the Social Democrats. Why? Because yes, Social Democrats, he has quite large disagreements on what to do with Ukraine and with Russia. But on all other questions, pensions, taxes, environment, economy, migration, he can find some common ground, with compromise but common ground. And the CDU, as I said before, has ruled 12 years together with Social Democrats during the last 25 years. So the experience is here. And the Greens, they are much closer to Merz in what deals with Ukraine, with Russia, but migration, economy, environment, taxes, it's all just red flags for the CDU and especially for CSU, a Bavarian Conservative Party, which is a bloc party of the CDU, and you cannot buy CDU without buying CSU as a part of the deal. So when you look at these two options, you will say there will be a huge opposition within the Conservatives to sign a deal with the Greens, despite the fact that I believe there could be a very interesting combination of these two parties. They could bring their strengths, and in their stupid ideas, both parties will be silenced by their partners. But I think that they will be afraid of signing such a deal. And the last option would be, but it's very unrealistic, I would say. It's theoretically possible, but very unrealistic, when the Liberals get into parliament, gaining over 5%, because now we're not sure they will, if they will, and the Christian Democrats get a lot of votes. So in this case, there would be enough votes, enough seats in the parliament for the Conservatives and the Liberals to create a natural black-yellow coalition, which was typical for 1980s. And this would be a real good solution, because there will be no internal conflicts on internal policy, on monetary policy, on taxes, on migration, etc. But the Liberals don't have that toxic Russian. Okay, all German parties have toxic Russian connection, but the Liberals don't have that characteristic fundamental Russian connection as the Social Democrats have. But I'm afraid still the CDU, SPD, Christian Democratic, Social Democratic coalition, and then we will need to look who will be defense minister, who will be foreign minister. Defense minister, Christian Democrat, if there will be a good person, it's good, but there are people who can be terrible, like the Eastern prime ministers of the Christian Democrats, or like other people who have already signalized that they want to sign a deal with Russia. And if such people like Ralf Stegner or Rolf Mützenich, both are current leaders of the Social Democratic Party, will be a vice chancellor and a foreign minister, this combination will totally spoil all good things of Friedrich Merz. And it will be like, I would say, having NATO run by General Secretary Gerhard Schröder. Like, NATO cannot save itself with Schröder on top. German foreign policy cannot save itself with Stegner or Mützenich on top.
That's a disturbing prospect, especially when we have Hungary, Fico in Slovakia, and all these people are getting in the way of making progress and not just resisting Russia, but they're obviously allowing Russian narratives, Russian agents on the territory of Europe to mess up the functioning of institutions and the support of Ukraine. Well,
what is good? We can be sure that Merz will give tours to Ukraine, even with like bad team. I think he will. First, because there is no reason not to give towers to Ukraine. The block on towers is purely Scholz egomaniac action, as he wants to demonstrate that he's the boss and he acts as he wishes, and the others must accept it. And other nations have given missiles, even the US have, and nothing bad happened. So, and Merz has promised to give towers many times. He demanded. He will look silly if he will not. But the problem is that Taurus will be not given immediately, because first you need to form the government, then you need to vote, then you need to set the ministry, then you need to train the troops, then you need to sign the contract, etc. So it will take months and months. And the worst thing is, look, Russia has fired over 1,000 cruise missiles to Ukraine, and Ukraine still stands. How many missiles do you need to fire at Russia to knock Russia down? Maybe less, because Russian economy is much more fragile compared to Ukrainian. But still, you cannot win a war with 20 missiles. And it is not about if towers will arrive or not. It is about the scale of the support. It's about all the type of ammunition. It's about all the type of weapons. And it's about that Ukraine finally must get a full green light of doing whatever they want with the weapons they have got. And I'm afraid that will not come even under Friedrich Merz.
We'll regroup and see what happens, and continue advocating, of course, for Ukraine, even after that new government has formed. Sergej, thank you so much for joining us on the channel. Thank you for everything you do for Ukraine. Extraordinary, intensive effort, and the heroism that goes into that. And, of course, the team that supports you, Sasha and others, and all the people who kindly donate to make that work possible. Thank you so much for coming back on today. I look forward to the next chance to catch up.
Thank you so much for this invitation. It's a great pleasure and a great honor to appear on your show. And thank you for what you do for Ukraine and for Europe. Thank you.